All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning for our webinar about our Cooperatives for Climate grant program and the recent evaluation that we completed of this program. I'm Ariel Kagan with Minnesota Farmers Union. I lead our Climate and Working Lands program. Uh, we're going to be with you all for the next hour and really grateful for your time this morning to let us share about this work that we've been doing for the past few years. Just a few things, housekeeping. We're here in Zoom. You can use the chat to enter questions throughout the presentations today, and we will get to those at the end. So as you have questions or comments, please use the chat. You can also change the view if you'd like to see the speakers differently. There's a lot of options with Zoom, and we have slides, and we'll also be having a panel discussion at the end with some of the grantees. We are recording this webinar, and so it will be available on our YouTube channel, and we will send it out to folks who registered as well. And we will be keeping folks muted throughout, so please use the chat if you would like to contribute to the conversation. So just a bit about our agenda today. We are going to have a welcome from our Farmers Union Vice President Ann Schweigel. And then we're going to hear from Katie Marty, the program manager at Minnesota, about what are cooperatives and why are they still important today. We're going to get into the details of this evaluation that we completed with Collectivity of our Co-ops for Climate grant program. And then we'll hear from some of the grantees about their experience with this grant and their experience in building new farmer cooperatives. With that, I'll turn it over to Ann for some words of welcome.
Thank you, Ariel. I'm Ann Schweigel. I'm the Vice President of Minnesota Farmers Union, and I also am privileged to farm in beautiful West Central Minnesota, where I saw my first robin today. Spring is springing. So Farmers Union has really deep roots in the cooperative movement. We were founded in 1918 as a group of farmers in Jackson County in Minnesota, in Southwest Minnesota. We're looking for ways to fight the railroad monopolies of the Gilded Age. Does that sound familiar to 2026? One of the ways they did this was by creating cooperatives to purchase supplies and deliver crops and livestock to market. They built market power and rural wealth by acting collectively to market their crops and livestock, while increasing their purchasing strength by collectively purchasing their inputs. Minnesota Farmers Union started a bevy of cooperatives over the years, including pictured on the slide, some tractors that were built in Minneapolis from 1940 to 1945, a cooperative tractor company. We remain committed to supporting co-ops and cooperative education and advocacy in Minnesota in the 21st century. It remains a dedicated side to our Farmers Union Triangle. I'm going to turn it over to Katie Marty at Minnesota to continue to talk about, what are cooperatives, what do they look like, and just wanted to welcome you here today to our webinar.
Thanks, Anne. Good morning, everyone. My name is Katie Marty. I'm the program manager at Minnesota, which is a statewide initiative really connecting cooperatives of all types around our state and also raising awareness of what cooperatives are and what power and potential they have to help solve some of our community needs. Next slide. I like to start with this definition of a cooperative, that this is really like the core elements of what makes a co-op, that it is member owned, member controlled, and member benefited. That the same people, right, who have equity or financial stake in the cooperative are also the ones who get to control it. And that is through one member, one vote. No matter how much equity or money they have in the cooperative, everyone has an equal say, and that is incredibly important for a cooperative. And then it is member benefited. Those same folks who have the decision making, who have the equity in the co-op, they're the ones having an economic return or social return, whatever the co-op determines that from the surplus. Next slide. The technical definition of a cooperative, these are organizations or businesses that are owned or controlled by the people who use them. It is not dissimilar from cooperation, right? The process of working or acting together, but a cooperative uniquely, right, is a structure, right? This is a business type to get things done. I like using the term for people business, right? That it sits in between a nonprofit entity and a for-profit entity and sits in the middle as this for people, right? It is often a business who needs to have revenue, goods and services, and continue into the future. But instead of just profit for profit's sake, it is what those members, those people determine is most needed. Next slide. So co-ops serve their member owners, right? These are members at the end of the day are the boss. This is the community at the top of this. From there, they may select to elect a board of directors to set the vision of the cooperative, who then oversee management and the employees. Next slide. So there are a whole lot of different types of cooperatives. I've listed some of our common ones here in logos at the bottom that you may recognize. Our co-op types, we have producer, consumer, worker, shared services, purchasing, and then a multi-stakeholder. Within each of these co-op types, there are co-op sectors that you may be really familiar with. Under consumer co-ops, we see food cooperatives, rural electric cooperatives, housing cooperatives, etc. And all of these different types of cooperatives have this common purpose to serve their members, but they all have different functions. They might help their members earn more, save more, produce more, share more. It is what that co-op determines the members, when they come together, what is most needed. Next slide. So cooperatives around the US, I like to point out this map that the cooperative sector is much larger than we think. There are nearly 40,000 cooperatives in the US alone and over 1 billion memberships in cooperatives worldwide. So that means 1 in every 6 people in the world on average is a member of a cooperative. And we can see this great concentration we have right in the Midwest and in Minnesota that we have the most cooperatives than in any other state. So we have a lot to be proud of in Minnesota and a lot of this rich cooperative history, as Anne talked about farmers union history too, that we can build upon so that we can see how cooperatives can meet today's solutions and needs. Next slide. Cooperatives, as we saw, in the US, and then are part of this larger international movement. This last year, we just ended the International Year of the Cooperatives in 2025. That was declared by the United Nations. And we will have an International Year of the Cooperative every 10 years. And that is the only designation like that from the UN. And it's really because cooperatives have been identified as these key drivers and possibilities to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And they have a role or a possibility in nearly every single Sustainable Development Goal. Next slide. So as we talk about this international movement and these cooperatives of all types, right, that we can see a 3-person worker co-op bakery, and we can see a CHS that is, on the Fortune 100 list, this huge size and scope and all these different sectors. The cooperative principles are really what can unite these cooperatives all under the cooperative roof, right? We've already talked about a few of these, in that first diagram of member control, member benefited, etc. So I wanted to highlight a couple of these other ones, autonomy and independence. In a cooperative, the members are the boss at the end of the day, right? You don't have an outside government, outside investor coming in to tell the co-op what to do. In the end of the day, the board of directors, right, the membership, they have the last say, and that keeps those cooperatives autonomous and independent. Education, training, and information. This is really key for cooperatives, that both educating their members, they're informed when they are making these big decisions, and also to educate the general public on what a cooperative is and how we can use this model to work together. Cooperation amongst cooperatives, we see this, and this is a key piece for Co-Minnesota, is how do we work together across cooperatives in an ecosystem to kind of raise all of our tides? How does a food cooperative purchase from an agriculture cooperative that's producing, right? All of these layers help create that stronger together mentality and reality. And then last, concern for community. This is really it sounds altruistic, and in some cooperatives that is really part of the mission, but it's also, as a member-owned business, those members are part of a community. And when that surplus goes back into the cooperative, they're making decisions that's going to better the whole community, not just the individual. These principles were created by the Rochdale pioneers in England in the 1800s, and they were not the first cooperators by any means, but they're the first who wrote down this list and said, this is what's working to make a cooperative, and this is what unites cooperatives around the world today. Next slide. I'll just briefly mention these are values that go along with the co-op principles, and these really help kind of in that DNA of a cooperative. We already talked about, democracy, equality, equity. These come out in those co-op principles. Self-help and self-responsibility. Cooperatives aren't coming in to save anyone. This is the community. These are the members saying, here's what we need. We're going to pool our resources so we can access that. Next slide. I wanted to lift up a couple other aspects of why co-ops matter and have mattered and will continue to matter as we move forward, that we haven't touched on yet. And one, co-ops keep money, jobs in their local communities. In the food cooperative world, it's every dollar spent at the local co-op is $1.60 generated in the local economy. That's this multiplier effect. All the surplus goes back into members' pockets. The money or the purchasing right is often done locally. The jobs are kept locally. Second, that cooperatives are more resilient in economic downturns and in impoverished communities. This is critical, and I think especially where we are now, that a cooperative has more options to stay resilient in these times. It often is not turning to laying off employees. It has more choices because it's not like investor owned. It's not controlled by like profit only. That cooperatives are saying we're going to take this longer look at of time and make sure that we can mitigate risk throughout that. And then last, there's no one right way to do a co-op, right? It's very flexible to meet what the needs are. And that could look, we need to run power lines to our rural community when electrification was happening. That's how our rural electrics were born. Or it can be today. We need to revitalize Main Street. How do we look at a real estate investment cooperative with our neighbors and look at a way we can invest that way? So again, no one size fits all. Next slide. For now, then, as we look to the future, there's just been such a significant change, as we all know, in access to resources, change in federal funding, change in the agency that many of us have. And so we see these cooperatives, right? Throughout history and as we're in this moment, as this tool for self-help, right? A community could act to preserve a resource or to create one by pooling their resources. There was in Morris, Minnesota, a movie theater that the community wanted to save. They pooled together and created a cooperative around it. Next slide. So why start a co-op? We saw from there, right? It could be to meet a need. It could be a market failure. Maybe it's better to work as a group, perhaps as a succession plan for a small business owner, or to create jobs. It doesn't have to just be a solo entrepreneur. You could share risk. Next slide. And thinking about cooperatives as those solutions for some of those most intractable issues in our community. Things we cannot solve alone throughout history have been done through cooperatives. We have that opportunity in housing, childcare, energy, local news, healthcare, and so many more areas. I think my time is almost up. Next slide. These are just some of the examples of some amazing case studies of co-op solving those really intractable issues that I'd be happy to share if there's any further questions. But thank you all, and I really look forward to hearing from all of the panelists.
Thank you, Katie. So with that, I want to share a little bit about our Co-ops for Climate grant program. We were thinking about how can we as Farmers Union, with our roots and values, address the climate change crisis that we're experiencing and that farmers are on the front lines of. We looked at the landscape and saw that there were quite a few options for funding nonprofits like us, frankly, and quite a lot of options for funding with entrepreneurs and businesses who are addressing these challenges and opportunities. And cooperatives, which we just heard from Katie, have all of these additional benefits and build local resilience and power and economic wealth. And so we decided to do a pilot grant program with funding from our partners at McKnight Foundation and Morgan Family Foundation to offer technical assistance and business development grants to farmer cooperatives who are engaging in climate solutions. We offered these grants for 2 years in 2023 and 2024, and the grants were up to $30,000 for technical assistance or business development. We were able to fund 7 early stage co-ops. Some of them had already incorporated as cooperatives, and others were just exploring the idea. A group of farmers sitting around a table saying, we can see this problem and we want to do something about it. Would a co-op be a way we can do that. And after those 2 rounds of funding, we thought, what have we learned? How can we take these experiences from these 7 farm groups and share out what we can do to scale this or to continue to fund in the cooperative development space. So we partnered with Collectivity to do an evaluation, and that is what we're going to share today. I have to move slides, so give me 1 second here, and I'm going to introduce Zara and Sophie from Collectivity, who completed this evaluation and are going to share about what they did that and what they learned.
Good morning, everyone. We can actually probably advance through this slide because Ariel provided a nice intro to what the program was. But my name is Sophie Reese. I'm joining you here today with Zara Zanussi, my colleague at Collectivity, and we are very excited to talk to you about the recent evaluation and the results and the process of that evaluation. Generally speaking, why conduct an evaluation on a program like this? There's kind of 3 main reasons. One is to know your impact. Thank you. 2 is to improve the program itself and create some recommendations that can guide those improvements. And oftentimes that 3rd one is really to support some funder reporting and make sure you have a good understanding of what the outcomes are from that programming. However, MFU President Gary Wordish really provided a very salient why, a deeper why behind conducting an evaluation in this quote, which is in the opening of the final report published by MFU. And this evaluation in particular does provide us a case study of how investments in cooperative development can advance creative, community-driven solutions, and in particular, in this case, to climate change and beyond. Zara, did you want to just chime in and say hello?
Hello.
Okay.
You'll hear from me in a bit.
We can go to the next slide. So what did this evaluation process look like? What was our methodology? It was a qualitative theme-based approach, and these are the various stages. So we began with a document and program review, really gaining a better understanding of the landscape and environment in which MFU was operating, in addition to gaining a deep understanding of all of the documentation and processes behind the grant-based program. We then moved into qualitative interviews with all of the grantees and followed that with data synthesis and coding. We took all of those pieces and assessed for some themes to pull out, which guided those recommendations. All throughout this entire process, we're aiming to center participant voices and make sure that the grantees' voices and experiences were really held at the center of the evaluation process and in the final product. And MFU facilitated that validation process with grantees prior to the finalizing and publishing of the report to ensure that it looked good by grantee participants as well. Next slide. We did start the evaluation grounded in 4 key questions, which you'll see on the left side of the screen. Through the process of synthesizing and finding those salient themes and publishing in particular, it was decided that it made sense to actually rework those 4 guiding questions that were key to the evaluation process into these 3 that you will see reflected in the final version of the report. Very similar in nature. Some of them are the exact same, but it helps develop a little bit more clarity in this consolidated version for the reader. Next slide. As Ariel mentioned, there were 7 grantees. All of those grantees are listed here, and some of them are able to join us today, and we'll have the privilege of hearing directly from them. The 7 grantees were all across Minnesota and We're notably in the earlier stages of cooperative development, again, as Ariel mentioned. And this program really provided some critical funding and opportunity for them to engage in the early stages of cooperative development. We had Headwaters Beef Cooperative, 40-acre co-op, Perennial Promise Growers Cooperative, Farm and Forest Growers Cooperative, Summer Kitchen Cooperative, East Central Livestock, and Yantan Wool Co-op. Next slide, and I will pass it over to Zara to go over some of the findings from those various key questions.
Thank you, Sophie. Good morning, everyone. As Sophie said, I am Zara Zanussi, and I'm a senior consultant here at Collectivity. So the first question is all about the program successes, and we highlighted some quotes to give you an example of what we were hearing from grantees. But the biggest highlights were that there was zero match funding, allowed for lowered barriers for startup and early stage cooperatives. A lot of the other cooperative funding requires a match, and a lot of organizations were actually able to leverage this funding towards matches for other organizations. So the ROI was, we'll talk about in a little bit, quite high in that regard. This was essential technical assistance that really enabled co-op formation and funding readiness in terms of getting bylaws together or a marketing plan or a feasibility study, that kind of thing. Really filling a critical gap in Minnesota's cooperative ecosystem, especially talking about funding for emerging farmers. And MDA defines an emerging farmer as a historically underserved community, including Black, Indigenous, and people of color, immigrants, women, veterans, persons with disabilities, young and beginning farmers, LGBTQ farmers, and others. And so really focusing on those various historically underserved communities when it came to developing a co-op. Next slide, please. So we broke down program challenges into two main categories. There were external challenges, which were systemic barriers to co-op development, really focused on the capacity and resource constraints. And then there were program implementation challenges, the biggest one being limited participation from existing co-ops. Some of the capacity constraints included balancing farm operations with co-op development, really creating burnout because there's a lot to do as a farmer, as many of you probably know. And so trying to develop a co-op on top of that is a lot. Funding infrastructure and equipment remained a challenge, and there's a need for additional TA providers, particularly with diverse experiences. Underneath the program implementation side, thinking about how can we engage established co-ops? No established co-ops participated in this program due to the scale mismatch. And so this program really being better suited for early stage development. How do we support those more established ones? Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, a little bit on the ROI, it's too early for immediate financial ROI, just because, as Katie mentioned, there's a lot of different steps into building a co-op. And so it takes about 5 years in order to be able to see that financial ROI, but really laying that critical groundwork for long-term success. But some positive impacts that we know were that foundational capacity to enable the future benefits, innovation, and financial returns, and really increasing awareness and engagement of the various ways, especially thinking through these climate resilience strategies and fostering community and collaboration. Next slide, please. So underneath why co-ops, there were 4 main advantages that we heard from grantees: democratic control and shared voice, collective market power, shared risk and shared reward, and responsive to community need. And so I want to go just spend a couple moments on each one. So underneath democratic control and shared voice, members really having that direct say that Katie was mentioning through that democratic governance and collective decision-making, and the fact that the people who are doing all of the work are the ones who are benefiting. The collective market power, that there's pooled resources, reduced costs, shared infrastructure, and access to new markets. And I imagine you'll hear a bit about that in the grant panel. The shared risk and shared reward, really distributing ownership and returns, aligning with incentives and strengthening sustainability as we think about this climate change lens. And underneath responsive to community need, thinking about this as a really powerful organizing tool that brings diverse people together around shared goals, fostering collaboration and community. And again, Katie mentioned this, but this is a very resilient way to organize in these especially trying economic times. Next slide, please. And so we came up with a list of recommendations and action steps, and the light bulbs are things that you can do. And then the little toolbox are resources that are either in development or exist that we suggest that you check out. So we have 5 main recommendations. The first is investing in technical assistance and really thinking about how do existing business and farm advisors learn about cooperatives so that they can build the infrastructure within the existing organizations. Currently, there's not a one-stop shop for co-ops. And so how can we build that? And I know that Co-Minnesota is working on that exact thing, but really thinking about expanding that capacity and scale of co-op development providers, especially with diverse experience. The second one is around developing and circulating tools. There's a library of resources and templates. One example is at start.coop, but trying to create more library of resources and templates for various co-op members. And in progress is the National Cooperative Business Association's virtual curriculum, particularly focused on rural and underserved communities. And they are making a version for co-op curious as well as co-op developers. Also thinking through ways that we could share boilerplates, bylaw examples, that kind of stuff. For coordinating grant opportunities, like I mentioned earlier, the fact that they were able to leverage the co-ops for climate grant funding for the MDA and other co-op grants was really, really important. And so thinking about how can we coordinate those grant opportunities more intentionally and ensure that those resources are matched to co-op needs at different stages of development. For connecting cooperatives, facilitating regular gatherings, having peer learning cohorts, and thinking about high-level conversations to really foster that collaboration, share knowledge, and strengthen networks among emerging and established cooperatives. And Co-Minnesota is a conduit for this, aspiring to be a convener and connector and working on a co-op directory. So stay tuned on that. And then finally, promoting the co-op model, really trying to highlight, especially in advocacy spaces, what the co-op, why we need to invest in co-ops. And so one of the biggest things you can do is telling your story to show that co-ops are lasting and successful models. Next slide, please. And so we are just so grateful for your time today and look forward to some Q&A later on. And I will pass it back to Ariel.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, it was so wonderful to work with Sarah and Sophie on this and really to understand, what we learned from this process. And now to help us get even deeper into that, we're going to switch to our co-op panel. So I am thrilled to be joined by 3 of the grantees that we were able to work with through this process. So Stefan from Farm and Forest Growers Co-op, Mark Reland from Perennial Promise Growers Co-op, and Hannah Bernhardt from East Central Livestock. So let's start with you, Stefan, and if you can just describe your co-op, why it was started, and how you use these grant funds to support the Farm and Forest Growers Co-op.
Certainly, thank you. Yes, my name is Stefan Meyer with the Farm and Forest Growers Cooperative. We're kind of based up in northern Minnesota, although we are kind of spreading our wings. We just had our 3rd birthday on March 13th, just last week. And we came together around growing what we call climate smart tree seedlings. And this kind of came together through the work of Northeast RSDP and Dr. Julie Ederson at UMD in the biology department. And it was looking at and examining how our northern forests and woodlands are changing due to a rather advanced climate change happening across northern Minnesota specifically, and the issues of forest and wilderness health. So back in 2020, there was a bunch of research being done and presentations happening, and they decided we need to start looking at genetics and taking these genetics and moving them northward. And at the same time, they're like, well, how can we also start to develop a kind of more of a local culture around growing these tree seedlings? And how can we bring this, some of this income and revenue into farmers' hands? So that's kind of where we started. And it started in 2020 with just a group of growers. And then as we kind of got the ball rolling, we decided we needed some sort of kind of organizational element that would really work for us so that we could combine our efforts, our education, so we could combine our marketing. Oftentimes when dealing with larger institutions around reforestation organizations or soil and water conservation districts, they want to typically deal with like kind of one customer as opposed to 20 different farmers. And so we kind of came together around that and decided that cooperative structure, even though none of us had ever actually started one or worked in one before, it really spoke to our values as small scale farmers. And so we decided to just jump in feet first, and we did that and incorporated. And at that time, we had I think around 10 to 12 farmers who were kind of part of the initial operation. And now 3 years later, we're up to 25 farmers going into 2026. And we've brought our internal production from just a few thousand tree seedlings the first few years to this year we're up to 40,000 tree seedlings, and we're working hard to keep developing that. Our goal is, within the next few years, get up to about 100,000 tree seedlings and somewhere around 40 growers. Again, we're spread mostly concentrated in the northeast of Minnesota, just because that's where we started. Though we are now starting to expand and build out hubs down in the Twin Cities area, and then also out in the Bemidji area. And as I've heard mentioned, the this Cooperatives for Climate grant from the Minnesota Farmers Union, it was just kind of perfect timing for us. We had really just come together. And although we were all independent business owners, we're farmers, kind of collectively trying to pull together a business plan and a vision. We obviously needed help. And so what we did with that money is our proposal was to work with Cooperative Development Services based here in Minnesota. And at that time, Kevin Edberg was the director, and he has since retired. So we kind of got his last great years working for the Cooperative Development Services. But we got to work one-on-one with him, and he walked us through the process of understanding better what a cooperative is, how to kind of work through the governance issues, but most importantly, he really walked us through building out a business and marketing plan for the cooperative. And that has just proved absolutely valuable. Just kind of really in those early formative years, kind of helping us think through what we need to be thinking of in terms of production and working together and marketing goals. I think our only complaint with Kevin is he actually knew too much, and we literally had to step back and process on occasion because he just gave us so much information. But yeah, that's kind of where we are and what brought us together. And we continue to grow from year to year. So I'm not sure if there's something else you want me to start with or.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. And we'll come back for some more questions. Let's head over to
Okay,
Mark
perfect.
to hear about the Perennial Promise Growers Co-op story.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Reland, and I'm very honored to be here to represent Perennial Promise Growers Cooperative. We were formed back in 2021 with the Minnesota State Secretary of State. And we're probably a little different in that we have incorporated the Capper-Volstead Act, which basically allows us to kind of sit in a room and set prices, and so which is kind of an interesting dimension to our co-op. So back in 2021, Carmen Fernholz, some of you or most of you probably recognize that name, along with the late Dr. Don Weiss had kind of come up with this concept that growers that are farmers that are growing Kernza needed market access, basically. So Carmen with 6 other individuals, and if I knew that Ann Schwegerer was going to be on the call, you could have had her kind of give this presentation because Ann was one of 7 original growers. So um, so we worked very closely with the University of Minnesota, the Forever Green program. As some of you probably know, the Kernza brand is owned by the Land Institute. So we like to think about Kernza as the first perennial crop that we're working with out of the gate, if you will. And we feel like if we can develop a successful business model around Kernza, hopefully some of the future perennial crops, whether it's perennial rye or wheat, uh, will be in the docket here for us to have a product that we can probably hopefully get some different margins to work with as it relates to what we need to support the co-op and the growers. So as of last year, we had 38 grower members spread pretty much across the U.S., mostly the Midwest. And 2 years ago, if we were having this conversation, I would have been explaining how we've been very successful with growing Kernza, but we haven't been successful with developing the market. So in conjunction with the University of Minnesota and the Land Institute and Mad Markets, which is our marketing entity, I can very proudly say that we, for our organic and regenerative organic certified Kernza, the bins are cleaned out as we speak. We are focused now on and continue to focus on developing a conventional market. And so we're within just weeks of going live with a new CRM system, customer relationship management system, where we're again going to be focused on trying to develop the conventional market just as we have on the organic and the ROC. So we are a volunteer organization. The 7 original founders have all kind of moved on. So we've kind of got a new generation, if you will, or a new group of leaders as we continue to build the co-op out. Stefan, I had to kind of chuckle a little bit when you mentioned Kevin Edberg because I've been drinking out of that fire hose myself for a good for the last several years. So boy, between he and Leslie Watson, just a fantastic group of individuals over there to help build things out. So the original grant that we'd gotten from the Minnesota Farmers Union, we used largely to kind of get things set up from a membership agreement, marketing agreement, some of the legal structure, and then also some of the sales and marketing help. So, we feel like we're having a very significant impact. For those of you that are familiar with the University of Minnesota's program and the Land Institute, Kearns is kind of unique given its perennial nature and a root structure that goes down about 10 feet. And so we're working hard to try and figure out how to perennialize the landscape, again, starting pretty much with Kernza and then hoping to participate with some of the other crops that are coming down the pike. So we could talk a little bit more about some of the challenges. Some of them are very traditional type issues, whether you're a co-op or not. As we've learned and heard on this call today, the co-op creates kind of a safe place for businesses or growers or farmers to come together. But quite frankly, the challenges aren't any different than some of us that have experience outside of farming and which is kind of where my space is, whether it's with consumer packaged goods or manufacturing or business development. So those forces are all pretty much the same that are out there. When you showed all the different brands that are out there, whether it's Organic Valley or Land O'Lakes, or we kind of forget about some of the bigger players that are out there in the co-op world. So let me kind of leave it at that, and I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this conversation.
Thank you so much, Mark. And we'll hear next from Hannah Bernhardt, who is in the very early stages of thinking about a co-op and is going to tell us sort of how she has gotten to this place and what she used the Co-ops for Climate Grant program to do.
Yeah, thanks, Ariel. My name's Hannah Bernhardt. I own and operate Medicine Creek Farm here in East Central Minnesota. I raise grass-fed beef and lamb and pastured pork. And the way that our project got started as East Central Livestock was actually through meetings held by our Regional Economic Development Commission through the USDA Farm Business Center program that has since been terminated. But what happened is a group of us came to these meetings to talk about, what we needed regionally as farmers to be successful. And one of the challenges that kept on coming up for many of us, particularly livestock farmers, was freezer space. And so this is a really kind of like specific and maybe niche challenge, particular to us, those of us who are growing grass-fed beef, where it takes a lot longer to produce the product, and then also we're all direct marketing. And so the Co-ops for Climate grant was great because we're talking about this challenge, but none of us really knew what the solution was. And the grant gave us the opportunity to actually write a feasibility study about what it would look like if we were to try to organize as farmers around creating shared use freezer space. And so our context was a little bit different because, a lot of cooperatives are coming together around shared marketing. And in our case, all of our farms have strong brands, and because we direct market, marketing is not really what we're needing to share. What we're needing to share is the equipment and infrastructure. And so, um, what the feasibility study helped us to do was kind of lay out, what all the challenges are for various options, um, and consider, what it might mean to individually invest in freezer space, and then also, what it would look like to cooperatively invest. Um, One of the big challenges that farmers like us are facing is due to consolidation, no surprise, because there are large freezer space facilities that you can rent space in. But oftentimes these are located in areas away from rural areas, so it's very inconvenient for us to get to. And then they also cater to the largest operations. And so it can be hard for an individual farmer to access like pallet space in that freezer facility. You also usually pay based on how many times you're coming in and out of the facility. So for small farms who are delivering to our customers a lot, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And then additionally, we have heard from other farmers that as consolidation continues, smaller rental leases are getting kicked out of these facilities because it just makes more sense to put more of the space towards bigger operations. So it's not very reliable as a solution. And so, the other thing that we've looked at is like oftentimes butchers used to have this additional freezer space for rent, and they have gotten away from that model for a number of reasons. But really, for small butchers who are also wanting to stay in business, like we need more of them. Adding this whole kind of extra business model onto these facilities doesn't also seem like a good solution because, as in all of agriculture, margins are pretty small, and it would basically take more work for them, and they would need to hire more people to manage this. And there's not really a great return on investment for them. Mostly the need is with us, the farmer. Um, and so, the benefits for us of looking at a cooperative model for this is that we could more slowly scale our businesses. And when you're raising livestock, again, the timeline to grow your business is stretched out over the time it takes you to raise an animal. And so, we can't really like just go all in and like one big lease at a facility when we actually need to be able to scale as we grow. And then, but the benefit would really be spreading that cost of the initial investment of like, say, a walk-in freezer over multiple people. And so we'd be able to slowly grow as we're spreading that cost. And then, of course, the certainty about being able to access the space. And, one thing we've talked about is like, well, does it have to be a cooperative model? Could one person just own it? But then you lose that certainty about accessing it. And when you have a cooperative, then there is a democratic decision-making process. And basically we would be able to all agree to how we're going to access the space. And, if in the future we would close it down, that would also be a democratic decision. So we're still in the early stages of talking about it, but I will put the feasibility study in the chat for those who are interested in reading it. And basically, we're just starting to garner conversations about it with other farmers to think through what it would look like to actually move forward with the co-op. Um, there are like a few spaces that farmers have identified that, make it a little bit more tangible about, taking the next steps forward. But basically, at this point, we're using the feasibility study as a way to start conversations and start thinking creatively about how this could look for us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Hannah. I'll invite Stefan and Mark back on video and we can have a little conversation and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. So please put those questions in the chat. So one thing that I heard from all of you is, these are businesses that work for farmers, right? You are farmers who are designing these co-ops. And so that means that this is going to make sense for how you run your business. So what are some of the most surprising things that you found in the process of starting a co-op? And maybe Stefan, will go back to you to start this off.
Some of the most surprising things. Well, I'd already worked with trying to organize farmers in previous lives, so I know farmers can be very hard to organize. So that didn't really surprise me. But I guess I think the thing that's kind of caught us is because we are such a we're kind of spread across all of northern Minnesota, is I think for us learning how to work through the logistics of organizing orders, bringing product together, because we do kind of bring all that product together into one spot so we can watch it over the winter. And just kind of it's the logistics. I think for us, the logistics have been a steep learning curve. Um, but at the same time, I'd say on the positive side, just how every farmer has just been so engaged with the process. And also very understanding, especially in these earlier years as we're trying to capitalize the co-op while at the same time making sure that our farmers and growers are getting a payback. And that's taken some deep conversations during our annual meetings as we assess how to best do both of those at the same time. So, yeah.
Great. Mark, anything come to mind in terms of surprises in this process of growing a co-op?
Yeah, I think complexity would be the word I would use. It's just been a very steep learning curve. We had the benefit of knowing what we were selling. That is the grain that was in the bins when we pretty much were formed. But just the complexity around developing the market and then coordinating. We have a number of members and just all of the activity that needs to happen to just kind of figure out something as simple as how many acres you have and are they organic ROC, and then we've been very successful. General Mills came back after Kernza here. I think they pretty much with Cascadian Farms announced their a little in a lot program several months ago, and we've been working uh, with Patagonia Provisions for several years, and And then you've got the are we competing or are we collaborating? And almost every conversation, if I'm meeting new people or I'm talking to somebody new, it's like, again, we in the co-op take a very, very collaborative type uh, approach, but yet the market dynamics, whether you're a co-op or not, you still have competition, right? So I think one of the surprising things for me too is just, how do you go to market strategy and set prices where none of that exists. Basically it almost sometimes feels like you're jumping off a cliff and you're trying to figure out how to fly, or we got the plane built so that we can start flying, but we're building it as we go. So but on a more positive note, again, we've met the challenges from a standpoint of cleaning out the bins. We doubled our sales in 2025 from 2024, and if we had the supply, we could double our sales again. However, we're running into challenges now, just being able to, with basically a 2-year lead time, um, getting enough acres in the ground. So,
I think it's worth just underscoring that you are, as a co-op, selling to some of the biggest companies in the country, if not the world, and that's pretty powerful. This group of growers in the Midwest is able to negotiate sales with General Mills and Patagonia. So congrats. I think that's
well,
fantastic.
and that's a really good point, and because what that calls out is that I think we all deal with the level of sophistication, whether it's Hannah or Stefan. I mean, from a grower standpoint, but yeah, I mean again, there's a lot of real magical things about a co-op, but it doesn't change just some of the basic laws of physics, if you will. Uh, you know, you have to. And now we're volunteers, so we don't have to make payroll. But like any other farmer, grower, small business person, I mean, you have to have cash to keep the lights on, and all of those kinds of things they're the same, right? And um, so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, you heard from Stefan and from Mark about working with Kevin Edberg, technical assistance provider, and we have great leadership at Cooperative Development Services that continues that work. Hannah, I wonder if you can talk a bit about the importance of technical assistance, which is one of the recommendations from our evaluation, is that there is a need for investing in more technical assistance for co-op development.
Yeah. I mean, technical assistance is the biggest need. Again, it's kind of already been mentioned, like farmers are already farming. We're pretty busy already just producing the thing. And so, the challenge with a co-op is that you're then also asking farmers to gather the information and, figure out how to put together this business model. And so having someone walk you through the process is really imperative. And I did see a question in the chat that I could also speak to, which is that yes, there are often these requirements from USDA grants for things like a feasibility study. And so in this case, the Co-op for Climate grant is actually a solution to that problem, which was that it gave us the opportunity to do that research and have that feasibility study that would then allow us to go on to apply for a USDA grant if we need to or decide to. And then I did also want to answer the last question too, which is a little bit different coming for us who haven't taken the next step yet. But I could say that, as we just think through starting a cooperative, the two really surprising things for us are one, people are actually really out of practice doing democratic processes. And in some cases, it's just like we need to be talking more about cooperatives and what they are and giving people a chance to participate in meetings where we try to make decisions together. Um, and then on the other side of that, what we have found is that farmers like us are also really desperate for community. And cooperatives actually answer that problem too, because now you're facing challenges together as a group, and you are feeling, less desperate, less alone, less afraid of these challenges that feel overwhelming when you come together as a group and can share some of those concerns together. And so there are definitely challenges, but also I think that there is a need for it right now in particular.
Wonderful. Well, let me invite all of our speakers back onto camera here for our wrap up. We're approaching the end of our hour. This has been a fantastic discussion. Katie, I wonder if you can speak to a question in the chat about how can we partner with folks that are here to support and grow the presence and participation of Indigenous and Native cooperatives? And then also maybe tell us a little bit more about the upcoming second Minnesota Cooperative Summit.
Yes, thank you. Well, my answer is a little bit interwoven, so that could be helpful. But we are hosting the second annual Minnesota Cooperative Summit. We held our first last year in Morris, Minnesota. It was sold out, and the idea was to promote the value of cooperatives and to get folks in the room to actually feel some more solidarity and support. And I think the folks who are in parts of cooperatives or part of cooperatives who attended felt more energized, right? To go back and do the hard work where it's, yes, I'm a farmer. Yes, I'm doing this other thing and I'm organizing, and felt like, oh, I have the momentum to keep going. Anyways, we are doing our second one in Duluth, Minnesota this year. And one of our partners, in co-hosting that is Northspan, and one of their team members is a band member at Fond du Lac and is also helping us with our planning. And we are incorporating within that summit then a lot of Indigenous history of cooperatives. There's, again, a long time history of folks coming together to cooperate, to access what we cannot alone. And that will also be part of our programming then. And so it's not a full answer to that, but one way of kind of highlighting, bringing together some of that really rich Indigenous knowledge around cooperatives and the work that's currently happening on tribal lands. And so I'll just say that, and happy to put the link about the summit in the chat. And if anyone has ideas for that programming for the summit, we also are still in development of it. So I'd be happy to take ideas too.
Fantastic. Thank you, Katie. And Minnesota Farmers Union is also helping to plan and support the Minnesota Cooperative Summit. It's going to be a fantastic event again this year. So put that on your calendars, and Katie will put the link in the chat. As we wind down, I wonder if we can just do a quick lightning round. This wasn't on our agenda, but I think it's good to hear from everybody of what do you hope the cooperative landscape in Minnesota looks like in 5 or 10 years from now? And that can be about your own co-op or broadly. And maybe I'll start with Mark on this and then head around the circle.
Yeah, well, I think the work that all of you folks are doing with the smaller farmers and the local community is just very admirable. And I think for us at Perennial Promise, we're trying to kind of break into I'll say the mainstream, the larger grower, right? I mean, we would love to get as many acres on the landscape, perennialized. So it's really, we like to think big, and we and we are thinking big, but with all the tactical kind of day-to-day stuff, you kind of get locked down. But I very bullish around what the results are for all of the work that we're doing with these co-ops, to create community. And I think Henry, your point is very well taken, or whoever mentioned about farmers always looking for that community. Otherwise, you're kind of out there on your own. So
wonderful. Stefan, what's your vision?
Well, I mean, internally as a farm and forest growers cooperative, as I mentioned, we'd really love to see ourselves set up in 3 hubs and, maybe getting up to about 50 farmer growers spread out across northern Minnesota. I guess kind of from our perspective as a group of farmers is we really believe in this idea of kind of the worker owned and bringing that money back into communities, as opposed to being a large corporation that may be settled outside of the state. It's our local producers in the state are producing, and ideally we are also able to start pulling our resources we need to produce from other cooperative growers within the state and really starting to create that internal circular economy, because there are just so many benefits to it, from top to bottom. So I guess that's my brief answer.
Love it. Hannah?
Yeah, I would just say real quickly, like I would like to see less corporate consolidation and more access and profit for farmers.
Wonderful. And maybe Katie, will let you have the final word on the vision for co-ops in Minnesota in the next 5 years.
I mean, I'd hope there's a lot more demand for cooperatives, that we're all coming together to come create common solutions. But I think to meet that demand, we need really increased support. And that looks like technical assistance, that looks like funding, and it looks like policy. A lot of the original agriculture cooperatives and rural electric cooperatives had this great policy environment to get started. And I think there's a lot of work we can do around advocacy and funding to make all of these ideas we all have and are working on really feasible at scale. So that's where I see us heading.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for sharing your perspectives and expertise today. Thank you to all the attendees who've been with us. We have been putting in the chat the link to the report, which I would encourage everyone to spend some time with. And we are also tracking the questions and conversation in the chat. So thank you for that. We will send out some resources and post this on our website so you can access it. And I think with that, in cooperation, I will say have a wonderful rest of your day and thank you.